Well, hey everybody, it's Chris DeFurio with Keys to the Shop, and welcome to another edition of Shift Break. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at La Marzocco. Check them out at lamarzocousa.com and also reach out to them at info@lamarzocousa.com. Their sales folks will be able to help you get the right machine for your coffee shop's needs. And La Marzocco, since 1927, they've been making espresso machines by hand in Florence, Italy. Beauty, dependability, innovation, things like the KB90 espresso machine with the straight-in locking portafilters, the classic Linea, which is always a great machine, and then you've got the Linea PB with all the tech of today in the same kind of housing as the Linea, and everything in between, like manual and a lot of automation and just tools to help you make great espresso in your coffee shop. And so if you're looking for the best equipment for your cafe and you want to upgrade or look for that second shop to have a new set of equipment, I mean, just in the market for an espresso machine, go to see what La Marzocco has to offer at lamarzocousa.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Rattleware. Check that out at rattleware.com. And that is where you go for small wares that just work. Small wares that they're in the background. You use them every day. You don't notice them until they stop working the way they're supposed to. When there's that one pitcher or that one whisk or that little thing that doesn't work the right way, it throws everything off. But that's what Rattleware is all about, is creating small wares that just work and allow you to shine so that the experience comes together very well. So check them out over at rattleware.com. All right, everybody. Well, today we're going to be talking about how not to be a jerk when you're training. And this is an interesting one because it's one of those moments that I can get vulnerable with you and just open up about my mistakes. And I've got a whole episode about this. I think I called it the 7 deadly sins of my career. And I've mentioned in other interviews elsewhere. The main story I'll mention here today. But the idea of training and associating that with jerky tendencies is not really a new one. I think trainers are probably, along with management, but mostly training, the first step a barista takes in the direction of having some kind of influence on another person. So that is a big step. Often it's a step made without any support. Usually it's the technical ability of the person that was promoted to the position of trainer that got them there, and not their bedside manner, so to speak, right? Not the way that they are with people, not their ability to teach, simply their ability to have had success in the technical production of coffee or the knowledge of coffee. Now, there is a necessity as a trainer to know some things about coffee and how to produce great coffee. You're not going to want somebody who's a technically bad barista training other baristas simply because they're a good teacher, because they might be teaching the wrong things, or because they're really great with people, but technically they're terrible. You're still going to have one part of the equation that's not going to work, right? And a lot of times, again, we focus on the technical because that's the most easily measured form of validation that this person could be our trainer because they're super into coffee. That there, I think, is the biggest thing, is the idea that the person is into it, and we desperately need somebody to maybe even take some work off of our plate as the owner or operator. And so we identify somebody who has at least a smidgen more passion than the rest of the baristas. And we're just like, boom, this person is now the trainer. This person now is the manager. Now, we know that that's not a great formula. That's not something that you want to do for virtually any position. You want to have a little bit more of a thoughtful process that brings that person to that position, because that's just better for the people they're going to lead. That's just better for them because they don't want to be put in a position without preparation, just as much as a barista doesn't want to work at a cafe with no training and then be held accountable for stuff they were never told or trained in, right? And it just so happens that to be an effective trainer, you have to kind of be a mature person. And a lot of trainers are very young and immature. Raising my hand here, that's exactly what happened to me, in that I had a passion for coffee. This was years ago, over 20 years ago, working at a place called Gimme Coffee. And I had a lot of passion for coffee. Not only that, but I had won some latte art competitions and I was into the competition scene. You see behind me here, if you're on YouTube, I have my trophies from my competition days of ancient days, really. And in the young mind of Chris DiFirio, that meant a lot. And I think you can still draw meaning from those things. I'm not saying they're not meaningful. However, it was often the only thing that mattered was technical precision. And so anybody that I trained was going to go through this rubric of competition that I came up with, which was, this is the pinnacle of what it means to be a great barista. If you're not a great barista, according to what I have seen as the standard, or what I've adopted as the standard here, then we have work to do and we're going to work on it. And it's not out of a sense of I'm going to totally like steamroll you, although that's the consequence, or a sense of I want to totally make you uncomfortable with, the judgment I have toward your tamping abilities or your latte art. But that is the result because it's all very technical. There's a checklist of things that I'm looking for. I went in during the rush with a checklist, like a board, what do you call it? Like blanking on the name of it. But this pad of paper and a pen, and I'm just in detail, like, what are they doing there? What are they doing there? That, my friends, is called being a jerk when you're training. And it is it is less of a jerk move when people trust you, but when you've built yourself and your position based on purely the authority of position and not on relationship or the betterment of the individual with empathy toward them, then there is no forgiveness really for that kind of infraction where you are just putting pressure on pressure in that environment. In any client that I talk to today, the two things that I tell them are, there are a lot of things that I've done wrong in my career, but there are a lot of things I've done right, but it's a combination. The amalgamation of all those things together creates what we can generously call wisdom from having walked the walk. So when people have an issue with a barista who is doing these types of things, or maybe is alienating people, and people are upset about the way that they are approaching, they're too harsh, they're too technical, etc., then I'm like, hey, I know what that's like. And I actually know what helped for me. One thing that really helped me was getting a 4-page review from a barista working there who was being trained by myself and didn't appreciate the way I trained. And up until that point, I think everybody was maybe obviously thinking the same thing, like, oh, this is not, the kind of training that we need right in the moment. Even though some of the training produced some good results, it didn't produce the kind of culture and sustainable work environment that a great coffee shop should be based on. Like I said, lessons learned. But this review, it wasn't even a review, it was a complaint letter. It was submitted, and ownership and myself and management talked about it. I'm like, that's a wake-up call, because in my zeal for the technical aspects of the job, I forgot about the people aspect of the job. You know why I'm so big on the idea these days of people first? Because the technical part is hollow, it's shallow. It leaves people feeling that way too if you are going to simply approach them as projects to be put at right angles and all this other stuff. You have to have a people first mentality. And I don't say that just because it sounds good, but because I've lived the opposite of it. Now, after that, it amended different ways of training. And having moved on from there and taken a job at another restaurant as a director of coffee in the area, it was a great lesson in the way that I trained people from that point forward. When I put my 2 weeks in for the job at Gimme Coffee and got the job, it actually was a restaurant called Carriage House Cafe in Ithaca. It was a move that, was almost like when you switch jobs, you think there are some lessons that I've learned that I want to take to this new one. And that was a great place to be able to say, okay, here's a fresh start. In fact, I remember being in the office with the owner of the business, telling him that I had taken this job or I was taking this job as we were talking about things, and he was, talking about stuff that they had going on, encouraging me to maybe stay around. It was this opportunity to switch into a different place uh, that was very attractive to me at the time. It could have been great to stay. And we were working on projects like the Barista manual was almost complete and all this other stuff. But it was an opportunity to take a next step. And I was also very fascinated with like the food world, especially at the time. So I took that job at Carriage House Cafe as the coffee director, which turned out to be a really fun job and really great opportunity. But I say all that because it again was an opportunity to make another switch into a new version of myself that was based on the feedback and learnings of both successes and mistakes of past jobs in my coffee career. And I encourage anybody who has learned some lessons in your past jobs, approach each new job with the ability or the mindset to say, what did I learn from this last one? And how can I apply myself to be a better version of this role in this new job, in this cafe? Um, and you are basically going to be given a fresh start in some ways to develop yourself into as an opportunity to develop others. And even if you don't switch shifts, it's okay, by the way, to simply change the way that you behave, to simply apologize to people, and especially one of the best apologies is to just change the thing. Nobody is perfect. And if you create a scenario where you've got a trail of offenses behind you for reasons that are not necessarily good reasons, okay? Sometimes if you hold people accountable for a standard, but they can react to it in their way, but it's not necessarily your burden to carry. There is a lot of truth to that. Not everybody who is given a people first empathetic training scenario with a lot of resourcing and clarity responds the way that you would want them to, and for their own personal reasons will create a scenario where you are the perpetrator and they are just kind of like the thing um, that was receiving that ill treatment. You have to know that what you're doing is done with good conscience and a holistic approach to a people first way of doing things. Consider a few areas that you can improve in. I'm going to rapid fire these so we don't make our shift break too long here. But how not to be a jerk, first of all, is to realize that you yourself are a work in progress. You yourself are not there yet. And to posture yourself as though you've arrived will create this oppressive sort of scenario, and it shuts down growth. You need to, vulnerability is like soil that's well tilled. It has aeration that allows irrigation, allows water to go in. Compact soil, the water doesn't get down and the roots die. You want the business to grow? Vulnerability is going to be the thing that really helps you become more effective at your role. Humility is part of that as well. Not only that, but you have to be focused on the long term, the results of your efforts, and be patient. Patience is a virtue here where you are entering with a curious mindset. Maybe you have an onboarding and training process, and of course that's going to be informed by the years of applying that process. It is a living process. It should change based on how you're informed and the feedback you get on it. Okay, don't wait to be curious about your own effectiveness and presence and how you're perceived until somebody writes a 4-page complaint about your oppressive training methods, right? Don't follow my mistakes, right? But The idea here is look at the long term. Yeah, maybe in the moment they're not exactly getting it, but are you frustrated because that's something that you are taking on as maybe that means I'm not a good trainer? Well, that's an insecurity that you're projecting on the person. Then you need to be a little bit more stable as an individual, learn what it is to actually train somebody and equip them, and apprentice yourself to the process of becoming a better teacher through the doing of teaching. You do this by planning out, scenario A, scenario B, have a plan B and C, and give yourself some space. It's okay. Cultivate these relationships, give people the things they need to succeed. And you yourself are a part of this process. Build that relationship of trust. And when you have to hold people accountable for technical things, they're going to respond way better to the authority that you do have, because they'll know you're doing it not because you want to be right or technically right, but because you care about them and their success. Okay, so it comes back to that people first way of doing things. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about today, and I hope that it's really helpful. And whatever this comes up, it's always kind of interesting to go back down memory lane and pull back some of the curtain to show, hey, this is stuff that I've walked through, and I'm sure you have too. Not all of us have had a life free of making mistakes in relationships in the workplace, but we always have the ability to rectify those things, to cultivate better relationships, and call each other up into more excellence together. So thanks very much. I hope that this was helpful for you, and I'll see you here next week on another edition of Shift Break, from keys to the shop.